I'm a full-time GP and I campaign with what spare time I have, and I've been doing it for about a decade. But I first met Jeremy Corbyn in around 2015 at a People's Assembly rally in Westminster, and at that point I'd made a documentary called Sell Off, and I was desperate to try and inform as many people, and I managed to hand this backbench MP a DVD, and he very politely took it, and he tells me he actually watched it since I've met him following that. But little did any of us know that an anti-war, anti-racist, socialist MP could ever be leader of a neoliberal, pro-war Labour Party. So it came as a huge shock to find that Jeremy had succeeded despite all the odds. Much has been said about his period as leader of the Labour Party, in print, in film, in documentaries, but this has largely been ignored by the media political elite, who wish to censor history by omission, by not revealing the truth of the smear campaign against Jeremy Corbyn. What is clear to me is now that we have a very corrupt, authoritarian and anti-democratic Labour Party. If that wasn't bad enough, they have enabled in opposition the worst, most corrupt government with an authoritarian streak that I'm in my 50 years, I have ever witnessed. Things are getting more and more extreme. There's been a huge wealth transfer to the rich under the guise of pandemic spending. There's a socio-economic war against the working and middle class. And there's a bonfire of our civil rights. We have no effective opposition, I'm afraid. But despite the onslaught against Jeremy, he has demonstrated, I think you will all agree, superhuman levels of dignity, restraint, and distinction. See, Jeremy has one big problem. He has authenticity. He's sincere. He actually believed in his policies, and I believe he would have delivered on those policies had he been allowed to get into power. So it was never about Jeremy, it was what he represented. It is rare as hen's teeth to have an honest politician with some principles in power across the Western world. Now, in the final few weeks of his leadership, a friend of mine managed to ask him whether he'd do an interview with me. Now, this is a guy who'd been battered, bruised, betrayed, stabbed in the back multiple times. And I thought, do I really want to bother this guy? Because he must have be going through a lot of emotional turmoil. But he agreed to speak to me. We went to his constituency office. He sat us down. We spoke for an hour about lots of things. It's clear he's got an extremely good memory, much better than my memory. He remembered meeting me back in 2015. That's what he said, anyway. And another hour of interview, it was pretty clear to me that on many of the issues that I have subsequently learned that afflict our NHS, he was on the right side of all of those decisions. He was on the right side against outsourcing. He was on the right side against private finance initiative scam, which has been used to sell off our hospitals and to shrink NHS capacity. He was fighting against the downgrading and closure of Whittington Hospital A&E. So this is not a man who is just hot air. He actually does what he says. And this, again, as I said, is a rare quality amongst politicians. So I was left with the overriding impression that this is a very decent man. This is a man who didn't seek to gain anything for himself. He had endured sabotage and betrayal from many different directions, but he retained his humanity and he retained his generosity of spirit. And I was left extremely moved and impressed by him giving me his time at a difficult time in his own life. But it's these strengths that his opponents fear. This authenticity, a man who intended to deliver on his promises. the case for public ownership of healthcare, of our utilities, of natural resources is stronger now than in 2019. We are entering sort of an end stage of capitalism whereby all our natural assets are being seized by the super rich and corporations. So Corbyn's legacy is to remind us of the common sense and the clarity and the economic arguments of public ownership and democratic control, which we are losing at a rapidly accelerating pace. So to me, Corbyn's leadership of Labour showed that his policy direction was not only popular, but needed and made economic sense. But we must continue to fight the threat of corporate capture of the state and fight against the theft of our nation's wealth. And Corbyn set us a very good example to follow. Thank you very much.